I am pumped to be here for this showdown between two of my personal favorite internet marketing friends, people that I've met on the internet about marketing on the internet. Jess and Andrew have a very special place in my heart for each of you. If you can tell us why, just start off, a little bit about like what your, creative testing methodology is, and a little bit about who you are, what you're about. I know Andrew, more of a numbers guy, Jess, more of a creative guy. And by the way, quick plug to both of you. If you're not following these fine gentlemen on Twitter, please go on Twitter, give them both a follow. Absolutely worth the cost of admission, which is $0. But if you're also not on Twitter already, come join us over there. We're having a good time. But yeah, Jess, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and methodology and why what you're about?
Yeah, creative strategy director at FireTeam. FireTeam is a performance marketing agency. We do some media buying, but most of our clients are for performance creative. And performance creative for us means we get paid more if the creative does better and get paid less if the creative does worse or does not spend at all. So it is very much in our best interest to not only create creative that works, but to level up our own organization so we can constantly make better creative than we did the week before or the month before. And in my opinion, the only way to do that is to get learnings on the things that you make. And the faster you get learnings and the more things you get into market and get learnings on, the faster you can iterate and the faster you can change and grow as an organization as well. Unfortunately, it does take ad spend to do that, but we generally prefer a creative testing methodology where every asset that you put into market gets enough spend to determine if it's a winner or loser, or to get to a point where you can feel confident iterating on. So this can happen in an ABO. It can happen in a CBO where you put certain caps or limits on it. The bottom line is that spend needs to flow to ads to get information that then you can then work on. So that's it.
Sweet. Thanks, Jess. All right, Andrew, let's hear your side of the story here. What are you about, and how do you like to do your creative testing?
Yes. Well, I'm going to resist the urge to respond to anything Jess just said and instead kind of go ground up so that I know, Barry, you can direct traffic after that, but just that way to kind of start us all there. Yeah. So so my background, spent the last 10 years in e-commerce, have been on brand side, then became the VP of growth at, head of strategy at Common Thread Collective, launched a aggregator from there called 4x400, which I ran into the ground. And I say that because Evan nicely said that I've had a decade of wins. There's also some losses in there, and I think I've learned a lot from both. And it's also just important anytime somebody's in a situation like this to not pretend they always win. And then over the last couple of years, I've been running my own boutique agency called AJF Growth. We service 5 clients at a time, do a little bit of coaching, and not really trying to grow it very much because I hate operating large agency stuff. So there you go. So that's kind of where we've been, all performance marketing along the way, wide range, very small brands, very big brands, everything in between, from kind of every seat in the house, I think. And then, as far as my structure, so to frame my way of approaching this, I want you to imagine that you're actually a poker player, and you are a poker player in games of poker where everything about poker is normal poker. It is the exact same as any other kind of poker you've played. We'll say it's Texas Hold'em. If you don't know how Texas Hold'em works, that's okay. You're going to follow the analogy anyway. The only difference is that for you have a tool at your disposal that reads your cards, every other player's cards, and the initial table cards, the flop, as they come out. It reads all of them, and then that tool does the following things. It calculates the probability that you have the best hand. It calculates the probabilities for what happens as the next 2 cards, the turn and the river, come out on the table. It calculates the probability of what everyone else at the table will do next. It reads all of the other bets on the table, and then it automatically bets for you as aggressively or conservatively as the probabilities say that you should, and whether you are likely to win or lose money. And now imagine that in this world of poker, the tool is completely legal and completely free. Okay? Would you use that tool? And the answer is yes, not only would you use that tool, but you would play as many hands and as many games of poker as possible, because what you just discovered is a money printing machine. As long as, well, I mean, I don't know. Did you discover a money printing machine? Not even as long as anything works, right? This analogy will break down at some point, but this is basically what I think is available to media buyers by running all of their creative testing and indeed all of their performance marketing ads through Meta's cost controls mechanism. Cost controls use a mix of machine learning and algorithm and probabilistic forecasting of the future to predict what is going to happen next based off of limited amounts of information, and then places your bets, by which I mean your ad dollars, aggressively or conservatively based on the probabilities as they are going to play out, and spends more or less for you, which has two major impacts. Number one, it scales your best ads way faster, way more efficiently than you would do on your own by trying to sort through this yourself. So you make more money faster. Secondly, it also suppresses your worst ads on your behalf without you having to do it, which means you also lose a lot less money. And if you do that repeatedly over a long time, what is going to happen is you're going to take the massive cost center of creative testing in your business and drastically reduce it, while at the same time powering a profit center. In all of this, what I believe is, if you had never heard of anything else in this conversation, but I told you that was available to you, at the very least, your default would be to start there before you tried something else. By which I mean, the burden of proof is on Jess to tell me why that's a bad idea. What I mean by that is, like, I think many people run creative testing campaigns simply because they heard about that first. And I bet you, if you're watching or listening to this right now, that is what happened for you. It was overwhelmingly the way everybody did it for a really long time. Certainly was the way I did it. And in my running 4x400 into the ground, certainly was part of the way we spent our dollars, and I wasted a lot of money doing it. Okay. And so what I'm saying is, that tool sounds so amazing that if there was good reason to believe that tool worked for lots of people, for example, if many other advertisers spending tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars doing that and saying, no, it actually does the thing that it says it does, all are telling you that it works, you should do everything in your power to leverage it on your behalf, because it is so incredibly amazing and compelling. So that's the case that I would make for testing creative ads in manual bids, by which I mean bid caps, cost caps, TROS ads from the jump, launching everything like that, and completely eliminating your creative testing campaigns.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Andrew, thank you. Jess, thank you. So I want to just point out, to me, what I hear is a difference between prioritizing efficiency and prioritizing creative learning. Is that a fair way to judge what each of you, each side is saying?
Go ahead, Jess.
I think that's fair, aside from Andrew being wrong in multiple things that he said.
Sure, you can say that. All right.
One question I have for Andrew is, if you're at the poker table and you have this machine that reads everyone's cards and you have that advantage, and other people are using that machine because it's readily available, and everyone basically has this advantage, what advantage do you as a brand or an operator have over the other people at the table if they're all using the same money printing machine?
I would say two things in response to that. Three things. First of all, the analogy probably breaks down there, as all analogies do at some point. So that would be one thing I would say, right? Secondly, I would, but that's how analogies work, right? No analogy is perfect all the way, right? There's actually
Can I pause you for a second, Andrew? Just for anyone who doesn't know either of these two gentlemen, both are two of the fairest and kindest people I've seen argue on X or Twitter. And Andrew is being very fair and reasonable. Keep going.
Well, secondly, the thing I would say is that if your alternative is to walk up to that table and try to read it yourself, you're going to get blasted. So if you want to push the analogy farther, the alternative to using the probability forecasting machine is actually going to be that you're going to get crushed even harder. It's not going to be that it's going to be better. There's no human advantage that you get from reading it yourself. This is a fundamental problem with creative testing. One thing, if I wanted to press you really hard on this, is I bet you your method for picking winners and losers in your creative testing campaigns is nonsense. And the reason that I think that is not because you're dumb. In fact, Jess, you know what I think of you. I think you're extremely smart, and I'm actively trying to get you to work on one of my clients with me, right? It's just that all humans, I think, are pretty bad at this. And a giant, huge ball of evidence from every account that I've looked at suggests to me that people are making these decisions about what creative is winners and losers based on the worst methodology I could imagine. So, okay. And the third thing is, one of the ways the analogy breaks down is that there's no house. in Facebook ads. It's actually not a zero-sum game. There's not a winner with a bunch of losers. Everybody can be a winner in Facebook ads, and that's one of the ways the analogy stops working very well. And so, yeah, if everybody uses the machine, in fact, I think if everybody uses the machine, what's going to happen is like there will be less competition on the worst ads, and so. Yeah. Anyway, actually, I won't even go down that road. But the point is like there isn't actually a zero-sum way like there is in a game like poker.
So I'm going to pause us there for a sec. Let's take one step back just in case there's anyone who's kind of like, whoa, we're in the deep end here. I just want to like maybe take like 1 minute. I think each of you have kind of talked about this. Andrew, you talked about this in your newsletter. Jess, you've talked about it in your previous Make Ads session. Can you just tell us like, what is creative testing and why is it important in paid advertising right now? Maybe just like, let's start there. I think Andrew, let's start with you if that's cool.
Okay, sure. I mean, all of us know that one of the key levers, if not the key lever in generating more ad dollars is by generating additional winning creative. And so the game is like, you've already got a bunch of creative in your ad account. How do you know if that creative is going to perform at your target? So I would say creative testing is just the process by which you discover which ads actually perform at a target that is profitable for your business. However you set that target, we can leave the sort of method of unit economics and LTV and all that kind of stuff aside for a second. Like whatever your business sets the target for profitability and its goals at, that's the thing. I don't think Jess and I probably have a disagreement about that. We're both trying to find the best creative that is going to generate the most profitable dollars for businesses that we're working with. I think, Jess, right?
Yeah, So I think creative testing is to find the best performing creative, but creative testing is also the training field, where you play poker in the back alley with other people to figure out how to get better and how to beat people. Well, eventually you're at the final table at the big game. And so if you're not looking at creative testing that way, I don't know how you're practicing. If we agree that creative is important or perhaps all important, what is your game plan for leveling up those skills? If it's waiting for something to beat your top winner in an ad account, you are operating on a cycle time that is weeks or months compared to other people who have a different strategy and might be cycling much quicker.
So I think it's a good idea for us to hit this learning issue for a minute, because this is something you talk about a lot. And I actually, in some ways, don't think we really disagree about this, Jess. What I think you're wrong about here is the idea that you don't get learning's my way of doing it. I think you get plenty of learning, and I think you get it drastically cheaper and just as fast as the way you do it. I just think like I would love to do this in an account with you sometime where we could really hammer this, because I'm convinced that I can get you plenty of information to go make incredible ads, right? So I'm going to screen share for a minute here, if that's okay, because I wanted to pull up. There's this idea out there that like, if you run your creative tests through cost controls, you're going to get no spend on those ads, and because you get no spend on those ads, you can't learn anything from them. Okay, so I actually pulled a client's ads here, and this is from September through July 9th, right? So I pulled this about a week ago, and just like pulled the breakdown of spend across a bunch of different ads, across a bunch of different thresholds. This is actually only evergreen ads. So I actually eliminated any sort of like holiday or promotional ads from this sample so that we could get sort of like the kind of evergreen stuff we're all trying to iterate on all the time. And then just averaged out like per month how many ads are getting above this like spend threshold. And what I think this chart shows, I think this is a really normal, healthy looking chart. Like some ads disproportionately crush all the other ones. You get this $100,000 threshold. That's really normal, I think, for almost any account anywhere that you get some super winners. Certainly, I've seen some accounts weighted more towards a couple ads than others. This ad, by the way, this account was.
Are you sharing the chart? I don't see the chart.
Oh, I'm trying to share the chart, but can you see it now?
I see manual bids surface lots of winners.
Yes, that chart. So the spend threshold. Can you see those spend thresholds?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the point is that like all this account has been run on cost controls. Like I think 100% of the spend, literally 100% of the spend has been run on cost controls, including every creative test that we've launched. Okay. And so what you'll see is there's 426 ads that spent $100 that you can get if you want to go analyze thumb stop rates and things like that. Like you've got plenty of video views on those ads to do that, right? And you have some super winners and some not. And my thought here basically is that like if you can't learn from that, then the problem is with you. There is plenty of spend and plenty of learning here, and I just can't figure out why you would need. You can stop my screen share now. I just can't figure out why you would need more information than what is there for that. And so when I hear this, yes, certainly there are some ads that spent $20 or less as we launch those ads, but we're launching enough ads, enough ways that like I just there's literally no account I look at where I'm like, oh, I can't learn what's working here. Like
let me ask you just a relevant question just for both of you. Yeah. Like maybe I missed this. Did you say how many what the cost per conversion was on that roughly?
I didn't say,
just so we can understand if
it's around
just so we can understand if you're so what you're saying, and Jess, I think you would ask this, so I apologize if I'm but my question would be like, if you're saying you spent enough to get one purchase, roughly one purchase conversion.
Yeah, although again, there's 250 ads there that are at $500, right? There's other ads that are like
I'm just asking that's the threshold, just in case, because if it was a $1
I don't
cost
care,
per conversion, be very
if it got 0 conversions, I literally don't. If it didn't spend with 0 conversions, I literally don't care. As long as Meta believes that.
I just want to make sure I'm hearing correctly. Well, for you, it's about spend and not about conversion data.
Correct.
Okay, yeah. Jess, go ahead.
I think one difference here is what we define an ad as, because when we make ads for clients, we don't make 250 and then dump them into the ad account and see what happens. From our point of view, the amount that you spend testing creative should be proportionate to your confidence in that creative. So if you have a machine that's just hoovering up UGC or organic stuff and then flowing that into the account, I don't know. I have no idea it's like a random which one's going to those work. So I really have no problem spending 50% on one, 50 cents on one, or $2 or $200 on the other. But if you're paying for creative from people that know what they're doing, I think you do have an onus to test that creative to see how far it can get and get learnings from it. And that's not $20 on a $100 CPA.
Yeah. But if I'm paying for creative and your creative gets no spend and the probability machine works, then there's something else wrong, right? Then what I'd say is you did a bad job. Like, and I don't think you're learning. If you're getting like that little amount of spend, I would say you're not iterations away from winning. You are overhauls away from winning. And the no spend or the very little spend is itself a signal that you actually should just abandon the topic. And as evidence for this, I enter into evidence. Actually, if I can screen share one more time, can you see no spend works fine? Can you guys see the slide?
Yep.
Okay. I enter as evidence here the testimony of one Jess Bachman, who I interacted with on Twitter. You've cited an ad for me that said this ad wasn't a winner, so we stopped iterating. And what I would say on this ad is that, like, okay, great. If it had gotten no spend, it would have told you the same thing. You didn't actually need that information to tell you it wasn't a winner. And so, yeah, that would be the way that I would think about that. So you can kill my screen share again.
Jess?
So I think one thing we would disagree on is that you can determine a winner or loser from basically less than the CPA worth of spend. If what I don't believe is that there is some magic in the creative testing part where Facebook can find a winner with $20 worth of spend, but for whatever reason, my top performing ads still need to spend $100 to get one purchase. It's the same algorithm. It's still looking for the best ad at the best period of time. It still costs $100 to find one purchase. So I don't know why we're in a whole different world where all of a sudden the Bayesian algorithm is on fire in the testing side of things, and you can call an ad a winner or loser based off $20 of spend.
If I am a poker player and I get dealt a 2-7 offsuit, do I need to see the flop before I make the bet?
Is this a trick
Probably not,
question?
right? That's the worst hand in poker, right? The point is, there's from a very small amount of information, I can tell something about the future very likely. And what I think is, and I actually do think people underrate this a lot, Jess, and I understand your concern here actually. So let me actually put it another way. You measure thumb stop rate on your ads, right? How do you measure thumb stop rate?
It's 3-second views divided by impressions.
Yeah. So how many you believe thumb stop rate tells you something about the likely success of that ad? If I have a CPM that's $10, okay, then that means on a 45% thumb stop rate, you get 450 3-second video views that are there. And what I think is that like basically Meta is reading that signal, and plus probably a lot of other signals we don't see, right? Like how long people are hovering over ads or whatever it is. I'm sure there's things like that in their algorithm machine learning. There's a black box there, I understand, but like what I think is there is some way in which Meta's massive treasure trove of data can use those what I would call micro engagements to predict macro engagements using Bayesian logic. And this is something significant. I think people want to take creative testing, and they want to basically run everything through like a randomized controlled trial, where it's like, hey, you got to look at two things, run a traditional split test. We know nothing about which one is going to work, and say ad A got this many purchases and ad B got this many purchases. And what I think is that you should not try to think about Meta's algorithm like randomized controlled trials and traditional split tests. You should think about it more with Bayesian thinking, which is probabilistic forecasting the future based off of some initial signals. And and I do so. I mean, I am definitely more confident in this than most people, and I understand that. But I do think that Meta is reading things like 3-second video views and 15-second video views, and projecting out from there what is most likely to happen. And it could be wrong. It could be wrong at times, but I don't care because I want to play the probabilities over
is never wrong. It's a very stable platform.
I certainly don't believe
There's no bugs. There's no outages. Mark Zuckerberg is a genius, so
yeah,
it's probably not.
Let me jump in here. I want to address. So I do want to point out, in addition to hook rate, I would recommend people also look at cost per 3-second view. To your point, Andrew, you made a great point that looking at rates, same as I wouldn't recommend looking at click-through rates only, right? Because click-through rates can be deceiving because they don't take into account costs or placements, or anything about, cost of delivery. So you can actually also look at cost per 3-second view, cost per through play. Those are not custom metrics. Those are already existing metrics. So definitely recommend you look at those as well. And Jess, I'd love to hear your point, your thoughts on how and if you think that hook rates, I think Andrew kind of put it as like that you'd look at hook rates as a sign of success. And I'm curious, Jess, is that how you look at hook rates, or how do you look at hook rates?
No,
and what do you? Yeah.
It's not an indicator of success. In fact, I'll share my screen and I'll go through an analogy of how we read an account and how we test here. And I think we will find some common ground on this particular metaphor once it starts here. All right, over elaborate metaphor warning here, talking baseball here. So your job as a media buyer, creative strategist, or whatever, you are the umpire. You're reading balls and strikes. You are making calls based off your experience. The ad is basically the batter, the ad that you're testing. And each swing is one CPA worth of ad spend. Let's say it's $100. So each swing is one. The catcher is not in this metaphor. It's not that complicated, but basically, let's say the CPA is $100 and the ad spend purchases. If you spend $100 and you get 0 purchases, that's a strike. So that's a strike, and your job as an umpire is to see that, be like, that's a strike. Do it again, no purchases. Again, that's a strike here. It's clearly not working. You would say that this is probably a failure. This ad would be killed in your system. Again, 3 strikes and that's out. I feel you can confidently cut that ad after 3 times the CPA in ad spend. However,
Jess, are you saying you would do that or I would do
that? We would do that. This is what I'm recommending. This is how we look at things.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
However, it's really not that simple. And this is where some of the other metrics come in. For example, if there was 1 purchase, let's just say that's a foul. Like this ad is not out yet. There's something there. Meta does need time to find the right audience pool, the right buyers pool. Creative targeting does not work on the first 100 impressions. You do need to find and get those signals. So we do another thing. We got another foul. This batter is still in play. We are still spending to determine if this is a winner or a loser. And if now we have, again, this is the third strike. And so you're out there. However, to complicate this a little further, let's say you do have 3 strikes. Normally you would cut that, except for whatever reason, the thumb stop on this is great. There's something about this ad which requires you to spend a little bit more into that. And maybe we'll call that last strike a foul because actually like the hold rate is good. So people are watching for some reason. It just hasn't found the buyer's pool or the purchases yet. So we'll give it a little bit of a leash. And then if it keeps fouling out, your job as the umpire is to eventually be like, you can't foul out forever. You do have to read these data in motion in particular and see where this is like too much, you're out. And that is sort of your role. So that's how we look at things.
I appreciate that. So Jess, let me ask you this. Is it possible to make an ad with a high hook rate that fails? Just simple question.
Oh, yeah, because failure is determined by the ROAS or the CPM.
Can you give me an example of an ad that would have, like, what would cause a really high hook rate or really low cost per 3-second view or really high hold rate, right? Anything like that, but would not sell well. What would an example of that be?
Yeah, so I'll show you actually sort of directly in motion here.
Gotta love motion. Motion team gonna love going to motion on this one. Nice job, Jess.
So this is the creative testing for one particular account. Here we have an ad here. We're looking for $100 CPAs here. We're now at $200 CPA, and we spent almost $1,000. There's 5 registrations, so there's something working here. But this ad was kept on so long because the thumb stop and the hold rate are excellent. So we decided to let it go to see if it could find an audience. And a lot of times we do find that there's like a little bit of a hurdle. And if you can get over that hurdle, if Meta can actually do its job within a few $100s to get to where it needs to be, then that ad can take off. But this ad actually was turned off because Rachel, our media director, decided that this was a threshold that was too high for these ancillary metrics as well.
I'm going to pause you there, Jess, because Andrew, I already feel like you're going to have a response to that. So I just want to make sure before we go into that, like, you can have a high hook rate, high hold rate, but it might just not be relevant, right? Or it might not move to sell, right? Those are things that can happen here. Now, Andrew, you're going to want to address the fact that Jess said something about pausing an ad manually. Am I sensing that correctly?
I mean, there's a bit, yeah, I think that's silly, but I think there's a bigger thing here.
Can you say why it's silly in case you think,
I
think
it would be helpful. It'll dovetail with this.
Okay.
I basically never pause ads. Almost at all. There's like a tiny little exception to that, but
Andrew, that's what we should put on a hat for you. Never pause your ads.
Yeah, I think Taylor gets that hat. That was his idea first. Never turn off an ad. But let me ask a question. Like, well, let me spit like this. I think, Jess, like what you just laid out, like reflects to me like exactly the problem here, which is that like where you call a striker a foul, like is just like made up. Like one purchase doesn't tell you anything at all. So you want to do this like split test, see if it works testing thing, but then the actual methodology you just employed to choose what a winner and a loser was, in my view, is like nonsense. Like it is like you're just completely making up when something is like good enough or not based off of like number of purchases. Whereas the probabilistic machine that we have is actually using a really sophisticated set of data informed by huge volumes of what has worked for other advertisers in the past to build a forecast of what will work and what will not. And so what I really consistently see from brands is that when they go and try to insert themselves into this process, they end up like spending too much on bad ads and not enough on their best ads. And it's a problem in both directions. They end up like underscaling stuff that could be winners. The first thing I do anytime I take over an ad account, anytime I take it over, and it doesn't always work, but it works most of the time, at least surfaces a couple of winners, is I go find all of the ads that somebody else turned off, and if it had any spend at all, basically, I will turn it back on in a manual bid and see what happens. And almost inevitably, there's multiple ads that somebody turned off that were actually a winner just waiting, but that somebody probably saw $300 and no purchases and turned it off. When really that's like flipping a coin 3 times, seeing heads every time and being like, I guess this coin only gives us heads. So if I want tails, I got to get a different coin. Like it's such a small sample. And
what you're doing
really
is
fast,
flipping a coin and not even letting it land before it's heads or tails.
I don't
be
need
like,
to.
The algorithm says it's gonna be tails, so we'll just bat it out of the air.
No, but I don't need to. I don't need to flip a coin to know that it's 50% heads and 50% tails. There's boatloads of data that are before me saying this is how much coins flip. And unless there is something weird about this coin, and in most times there's not, I should assume there's nothing weird about the coin. My baseline assumption should be normal, right? Now, if it flips heads 20 times in a row, I might start to go like, boy, that's actually an extremely small probability something is weird here. But this is the point. I don't need to flip the coin to know what's going to happen. I can rely on lots and lots of coin flips before me to know that it should be 50-50.
So both of us actually don't know how the algorithm works, but I think there's a difference in how we think it works. Like if my CPM is $10, that means each impression is 1 cent. It cost me 1 cent to serve that impression. Meta is a profitable company. They need to get a profit on that 1 cent. So there's within that 1 cent is their entire P&L, some fractionalized version of their entire P&L. What I don't think is happening is they are running that data to like some supercomputer in California and then figuring out the best person to find it and then serving it back and then sending it back to us. I feel like they're doing this massive amount of batching of impressions to get data because that is the most profitable way to do it. I'm not sure whether if that batching is, $4 of spend or 10 or 100 or whatever, but I definitely err on the side. Meta, like you've worked with Meta enough not to constantly trust what they say. Do you listen to your reps?
Yeah. No, not really.
But we don't listen to the reps on purpose, but somehow the algorithm is something that we must listen to. It's all the same company, and they screwed us over many times. It's kind of a mess. And so I look at that mess and I'm like, I actually would rather hedge that they are not the all-seeing eye of Sauron in this game, and that there's some other skills to be deployed here.
Yeah.
Let me ask both of you a question. Let me pause there because I think we'd all agree that we are skeptical of anything that Meta tries to tell us, and we are skeptical of a little bit of the performance, but we also all trust it gets it right a lot in a lot of ways. I guess I want to know if either of you feel that when you're using if you're using a bid cap or a cost cap, if there's something that's potentially being missed or limited by the system, right? That's not allowing something to be found or something to be won. And maybe that an ad that's better at doing something like something that's good for the whole ecosystem of your brand and your advertising.
Yeah.
But maybe isn't so great at immediately getting sales. Like, I guess, I don't know, Andrew, if you can address that, like what your stance is, and Jess, I'd love to hear your thought as well.
Yeah, my short answer is not really. I'm not very worried about that on the whole. I think if you really wanted to be concerned about that, and I know like Barry, you've brought up the idea before. I think this is a compelling idea that I think is probably still basically wrong, but is interesting that you could at least you could bake in if you wanted, which is that like because it's really hard to sort out what ads are prospecting versus retargeting, that maybe if you set sort of one bid cap or cost cap across the board, you're limiting sort of ads that could be more upper funnel. And actually, like let's say you needed a blended $100 CAC, right? You could actually take some ads to 120, whereas other ads you want at 80, and that's how you get to the number you want because they fit different places in the funnel. That's not out of the question to me, but I think I just am skeptical of those explanations, and it just feels like a story that's made up about like still images are only bottom funnel and that sort of thing. I just think, I don't know, maybe there's something there. Yeah.
Let me ask you a hard question. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure.
Right. So you'd rather you batch creative into an ad set and you set a bid cap at that ad set, right?
Sure.
So what if, in a way, you are limiting the system, the algorithm by doing that? Because technically speaking, you could put ads in a bigger ad set, a lot of those ads in a bigger ad set. Not that I would trust that the system would know what to do with 50 ads for a limited budget.
There's a lot of data there, Barry. It's pretty smart.
I wouldn't trust that. I wouldn't trust that. It's a little bit problematic. Maybe ASC, I don't know. But I guess if the system had a chance to put ad A that maybe isn't great at getting an immediate CPA with ad B that's really good at getting a low CPA from maybe warmer users, maybe the system would potentially know how to allocate the budget with those together. Because if you're using a bid controlled system like that, it can't do that, right? It is potentially preventing the system from spending more on ads that don't generate an immediate great CPA. So I guess that would be my are you technically limiting the system's ability to optimize effectively by setting those bid limits?
I guess possibly, but I don't know. I just like watch ad accounts scale to lots and lots and lots of spend regularly by doing this. And so like there's this really important idea in all of this conversation, which is like, what's the alternative? What is the alternative scenario? So like, for example, like you just brought up, I mean, this I think applies to what you just said, Barry, and also something Jess just said. Jess, you brought up the idea like, you're sort of making fun of Meta's algorithm. Like, of course, it doesn't work right all the time. It's like, but you know who I see work worse than Meta's algorithm constantly? Humans. Me. I am not as good. If I didn't sleep that well last night, or if I got in a fight with my wife, maybe I'm going to turn off an ad because I'm feeling buggy, like whatever.
Do you have auto optimizations on?
Oh, almost all of them. Yeah. Okay. I basically anywhere where Meta allows me to leverage more machine learning, I say yes. And it's because like if I want to give Meta as much information as possible, absolutely all the time. And so for me, this is the baseline thing is like I agree that Meta is not perfect. I at no point will you ever hear me say Meta is perfect. What I will say is Meta's data-driven probabilistic Bayesian forecasting machine built off of unbelievable boatloads of big data is like 900 times smarter than me at knowing what to do next. And on top of that, all of us actually believe that and behave that way all the time. That's why we spend all of our money on Meta ads. That's why you don't separate out every ad into a single ad set, into a single campaign, because you trust at some point the ad set can do all that. So for me, like, I just think like that is the baseline consideration, and people need to have a little more humility about their ability to actually be the umpire. We suck at being the umpire. We suck at it, and I'd rather trust the data.
My counter to that is something that we talked about a little bit earlier, and I just wanted to share what I think is the most important creative metric that. And I just
want to note for time, we're going to do this. We'll maybe do another point or two, then we're going to switch over to Q&A. But go ahead,
I want to give one compliment to Jess too that I think is important. It'll take me 1 minute, and I think it's important in the conversation.
2 minutes, you have plenty of time.
Please.
Go ahead, Jess.
Oh, so
you meant after,
yeah.
No, I meant your compliment can last for 2 minutes. You have
yeah.
Okay, so the most important creative metric is none of the things that we've talked about. It's actually CCT, which is something that we try hard to measure. And the account, we're on a bunch of accounts. The accounts that are growing the fastest are weathering any potential storms, have the lowest CCT, and that is the creative cycle time. So what this is all ads are guesses. You put in an ad, you have no idea what it is. Iterations are actually educated guesses. You can look at the data and make some particular change in a direction. It's still a guess, but it's had more likelihood of a success here. Yep. So here's the cycle. It's pretty simple. You test an ad, you analyze the data, you make another ad. Test an ad, you need ad spend, a good testing structure. No spend is no result for me. We can disagree on that, but this is sort of what I've seen.
That's fine.
No result is no action. I'm not gonna, even if you if in your setup, the ad spends $4 and you say it's a winner, I'm not going to take an action.
I
on
wouldn't
that.
say that. I would say it's a loser.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. No action is no change. And so in order to speed this up, you need very good analysis tools, Motion for one, great fast communication between your creative team and your agency and approvals, everything like that. The media buyer needs to be like reading the data too and looking at the creatives. It's very hard to do this in a silo. The brand, the agency, they all need to, like the feedback loops. You need to get approvals on stuff very quickly. Motion is also helpful with this. And the reporting frequency, just to note, can be the speed limit. If you are in a reporting frequency of every month, like every month, I'm going to show you how your ads did, then you've hard coded in this cycle time of a month, which is a disaster. To make this work, you need a talented creative team. You need really good creative relationships to work with people again, and flexible scope of works. Slow approvebacks are an issue. So in general, like 2 weeks is good. If you can put an ad, get some data, and return it in 2 weeks, that's good. 4 weeks, we see a lot or worse. And then 1 week is very possible, but will make you crazy. And I guess we do work. We are the creative partner for some accounts that are almost entirely cost caps. And some of the reports are like, I'm sorry, there's not enough spend. We just can't confidently do anything with this particular ad, because sometimes there's even less than like $2 in spend. And I guess that's a disagreement that whether that's a loser or not. But
Jess, I think this does a perfect lead into my compliment, and to this comment Wes or I just made. I feel like it's hard to evaluate what the right answer is because Jess and Andrew are both so demonstrably good at their own strategy. I'll leave my name off the table there, but what I can say about you from having you on my podcast and talking to you about this is that, like, one of the reasons I think your idea is bad for most advertisers is that you have the most operational process for this of anybody I've ever met. People all like the idea of learning from ads and iterating off of them. But like, I'm actually not so worried about how this plays out in a FireTeam ad account because I've watched you work. Like you are actually turning ads into creative stuff. On top of that, you're also like one of the most creative advertisers I've ever met. Your creative is really good and interesting. And the combination of your talent level mixed with like your process, which is like, it's like a Notion masterpiece. It's incredible to see what you guys do. Makes it so that I believe you actually can turn this kind of stuff into iterations in a way that most people simply can't, right? Including me. Like I'm not a good process builder, so I don't try and do what you do. And so I think there's like an important thing here, which is like I actually think most people should do my way entirely because you could learn from those top spenders. Don't learn from the other ones. And like I actually do believe your bad creative does better than most people's bad creative. I'll resist slides, but most accounts I look at, like bad, quote unquote. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, like the slides that I could show you are just like hundreds of thousands of wasted dollars in ad accounts with the word creative testing on the campaign title. And I bet you that's not true for you because you're just better at it. So I just think that's like an important clarification. Your process is awesome. It's awesome.
Let me turn
why
the compliment
I'm trying
back.
to get you to work on brands with me.
Let me turn the compliment back around and say that I would agree for most brands, your method is the one that they should basically any brand, it's your method is the one that they should deploy first to get them to a certain level of scale. I think once you, we often work with 8 and 9 figure brands, and for those brands, learnings and evolving the messaging of like the entire brand are almost paramount to the ad account in some cases. And that's something that is very difficult to do with like 200 things in the ad account. And just so I would definitely start with Faris's method. But I would like, if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to spend a lot of money and waste a lot of time doing my method for sure. Once you
just said it. See you guys later.
Once you get the skills or can afford to hire the skills to do it better, you're definitely going to do a better job with my method.
I think we can all agree that using a tool like Motion, not that I've been told to make this plug, but using a tool like Motion can certainly help you to better understand what's going on in your creative and better understand and share that information with your team, which is what makes Motion so great. Again, was not told to make that plug. I just figured someone might want me to. So guys, it was really, I think the audience is very upset to hear you guys loving each other. A lot of hate on that, which is hilarious to me. But you know, I've enjoyed this both this call, this whole thing, but also being with each of you and talking about these things with you and watching, iron sharpen iron here, both in this call and previously. Recommend anyone who's enjoyed any of this to go check out Andrew's podcast, where both I've been on there with Andrew and talked about stuff. Jess has been on there. Tons of content from Jess as well out there on the internet, including our own Adtopsy old channel show, which hopefully we'll get back to someday. But huge plugs for both these guys right here. Let's shift into, I mean, we could talk about this all day. Literally, I think Andrew said, like, his only concern about this is we could do this for like 7 hours. Yeah. And I agree. I'm having so much fun here. But let's Q&A? Yeah, let's move into Q&A here. There's a big question. A lot of people upvoted. Throw your questions in there. We'll see if we can get through them. But the first question here is, if Andrew is saying most people don't assess winning ads correctly, how would he suggest we do that?
You don't. You just look at amount of spend relative to manual bids, and the more the ad spends, the better. The one thing you have to watch out for, and this kind of brought up earlier, I'll just mention it really quickly, is that occasionally an ad with an extremely high hook rate. I think that Meta's probabilistic forecasting works off of early engagement signals, basically. Yeah. So there are some times when ads with extremely high hook rates, extremely high amounts of engagement, I think signal to Meta this is a winner when actually it's a loser. Usually if there's something sort of clickbaity about your creative, like if you're doing something sort of tricky, then that will sometimes signal that. That's the one time I will sometimes go and like isolate an ad and lower the spend and just sort of like double check that it works, something like that. So again, I think I see why Meta would do that. I also see why you want to change it. But otherwise, yeah, it's about amount of spend. Look at what is spending the most, iterate off of high spenders. To ditch your non-spenders.
I would echo your point about I do think it is an either like an attention thing. Like if Meta senses an ad is getting a lot of attention, even if it's not the right attention, it can start to favor it early on. But as you said, I would echo what Charlie T says. I can't believe I'm going to quote him here, but spend is a meritocracy. So I can't believe I'm quoting him. But I love Charlie. Anyway, Jess, anything to add on this?
Nope.
All right, cool. Let's move on. I want to just do a rapid fire on this one. Are you guys using DCTs, dynamic creative testing, I guess, or ad sets? Just yes or no?
Sometimes, but not that often.
If it makes sense for the catalog, huge catalogs, yeah.
Cool. I'll answer that question as well for myself, which is similar to Andrew. Like if it's appropriate, like if I want to be lazy, sometimes I might use it. If I have a reason to use it, I'll use it, but I actually generally prefer non-dynamic. Also, those are going away in favor of some worse replacement, so rip in peace. All right. Let's move on to let's ask this one here from Fergal. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Would you say the goal for your clients is different, therefore your approach is different? Someone has hired you to generate creative to scale versus someone has hired you to increase profitability. Like scale versus profitability, love it. And I have not thought about the difference between creative for scale versus profitability, I suppose, but I think methodology perhaps would. So Jess, I don't know if you want to touch this first.
Well, I think it's interesting because creative costs money, and if you operate in a case where you're dumping bringing up old stuff or whatever that costs nothing to turn back on, it kind of makes sense. But creative should be on your P&L, and so you should try and understand if it works or if it not. Otherwise, you're just going to keep cycling through agencies, being like, that didn't get any spend, next agency or whatever. But at some point, you do have to take those learnings in-house.
Yeah. I think probably Jess and I don't have any difference in what the end goal is here, which is why I'm trying to get Jess to work on some accounts with me, because we are aligned, which is like almost inevitably the goal of any business is to generate as much equity value or enterprise value as possible. And the way you do that is through a combination of growth and profit. And really, especially in e-commerce, right? Like your valuation of your business is going to be almost 100% rooted on profitability and EBITDA. So yeah, all I care about is scale and profit. The biggest single myth about manual bidding, including my creative testing method, is that it works against scale. That's completely wrong. Manual bids scale just fine. And the best evidence of that is Common Thread Collective works exclusively with 8 and 9 figure businesses. They run almost all of their spend on manual bids. The idea that you can't run it on larger brands is wrong. I've spent millions of dollars in a month on manual bids, and I generally see manual bids scale much faster than somebody's auto bids. So, so people say this, but if you want profitable scale, in my view, that's the case. I'll quickly screen share one more thing and answer that question. If I can get the screen share back up. This is actually another major reason why I, can you see this?
I see black screen.
How about now?
Nope.
Yes or no?
I see nothing.
Okay,
No.
well, never mind. The point is
that.
Wait,
there we go.
Okay, how about now?
Number 2?
Yep.
Super.
Here's the testing campaigns versus non-testing campaigns. They are just regularly, drastically underperforming. The testing campaigns are. Part of the reason you should use my method is because you're going to eliminate a massive cost center in your business. And so you don't actually need the testing campaign to create the non-testing numbers. That's the lie. You can just launch everything into the non-testing manual bids and it will work just fine.
I object on this one. Like this is a labeling problem here. Testing is obviously going to do worse than your non-testing.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to. That's the whole point, Barry. Yeah. The whole point is launch everything with a manual bid. It doesn't do that. In both of these campaigns, in both of these accounts, I did that. I actually got rid of the testing campaigns, and it didn't hurt their scale at all. It just eliminated a cost center. That's all it
understood.
Did.
You're consolidating. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm curious. One thing I want to note or point out, and related to that last question, and maybe dovetails with it, is I wonder if you would consider maybe that each of you are attracting very different types of clients and have in your past jobs and lives and past agencies, that perhaps there is, a big difference in what you've seen and what each of you have seen. We're perhaps siloed or in echo chambers, not just in like Twitter, but in our clients that we've been exposed to. So I'd be curious if Jess or Andrew, let's start Jess. I'd love to hear your thought on that real quick. And I know we are 1 minute out. I don't know if we're able to keep going here.
I've got 5 extra.
Down. Okay, cool.
I don't know what team motion has. But.
So one of the challenging things I have with any advice, particularly as dogmatic, is that we've seen every strategy both work and not work, both at scale and on small accounts. Like there is no, I will die on the hill that there is no strategy that works every time. We've had accounts where we have struggled and we're like, oh, let's just do what Faris says. And then we do it. And for whatever reason, it doesn't work. So it's not, I just struggle with any advice that's like, this is the way to do it, because that's just not happen. That's not what happens in practice at all.
Yeah, I think that's the most wrong thing in e-commerce right now. The most wrong thing in e-commerce right now is the idea that different things work for different people and there's no better and worse. And Jess, Jess, that's not going to be news to Jess, right? Like I've heard him. I think you know what I mean. I'm not trying to take a shot at you. I think you've got to get held down to a point of view as best as possible and actually test it against something real. And I actually think the phrase "there's no one way to do it" it itself is suggesting a one way to do it, which is that you test it every time in a different way. So it to me, like I think it overwhelming. It doesn't mean it's always easy. And it doesn't mean that if you run bid caps, you're suddenly going to be profitable when you weren't before. Like it's possible your creative still isn't good enough. Jess and I did work together on a client where that happened. Like neither of us could solve it. And it wasn't a bid caps or a cost cap or creative testing method. It was just, we just didn't solve it. And so like, I'm not saying it is a magic thing that makes your brand profitable when it wasn't before. What I'm saying is that it's demonstrably better than the alternative, even though there are lots of factors in the success of a brand. So yeah, brands can definitely still be successful while doing it this way, but I think that they're still under-optimized if they're not doing it this way. People hate that idea that there's a right and a wrong way to do it, but I think it's true.
All right, I'm just going to add my 2 cents in case. You're getting kicked out?
I'm getting kicked out of a room, yeah.
Bring us with you. Like I would wonder if there's certain brands that have different higher or lower existing intent, right? Or different higher or lower, known or awareness or, just of that product, of that type of category or whatever it is. And it's very possible that certain agencies, certain people attract more or less of different ones. So I would just add that.
I have to go, unfortunately.
Okay.
I'm getting kicked out of a shared room, and I didn't realize there was somebody coming after me.
Womp womp. All right. Well, we'll finish
Sorry.
this off in Twitter. Maybe we'll answer some of these on Twitter. Thank you all so much. Andrew, Jess, thank you so
you're
much.
The best. Barry,
you guys
the best.
are both the
Thank
best.
you.
You guys
Likewise.
are the best. Honored to
Always
have done
fun.
this.
Thanks, Motion.
Huge thanks to Motion for putting this on. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you so much for all the chat and all the attention. Follow us all on Twitter, LinkedIn. You know all the stuff. Really appreciate it. I think that's it. See you out there. Take care. Bye-bye.
It's time to ship more winning creative with Motion's creative analytics platform that helps you scale winners into unicorns and helps you figure out where your ads might need just a little more help. Join over 2,100 teams shipping winning ads with Motion like Vuori, True Classic, HexClad, and more. Get a free VIP tour today, and you can see how Motion can help your creative strategists and your media buyers speak the same language.